Cortez starts off by saying she's not much of a drinker. It might seem a little bit strange here to talk about not drinking. What does she mean? Water or coffee, but usually in English, if you use drinker like this without any particular context, it tends to refer to alcoholic drink. So she's saying when she was younger, she didn't sit around and drink and talk with their friends. They would go play games together. Cortez also talks about a game arcade. An arcade is basically a covered street. Originally, an arcade was a row of arches that you could walk under and find a nice space. So a game arcade is kind of a place where many games are lined up, all kinds of different games. You can also take the place and turn it around and talk about arcade games. And an arcade describes the kind of games you would find in a place like that. The place probably comes from the mid or late 70s. Overnight is a word that's often used in English to mean very, very quickly or before you know it. It's like one day everything's fine and you go to sleep and the next day it's gone. You can also use overnight as a verb, but then it means stay somewhere and not come home at night. The word niche, N-I-C-H-E, it has been used in English for quite a while, but it came originally from French. Many people pronounce it niche, like we have here in the vignette, but a lot of people also pronounce it niche. Both are correct. There's no problem with whichever one you choose. Cortez uses the phrase stick their heads in the sand to talk about businesses that are trying to avoid reality. English speakers say that ostriches stick their heads in the sand to avoid some sort of enemy or attacker. I think the idea is if you can't see it, it's not gonna hurt you. I've heard somewhere that ostriches don't actually do that, but the phrase remains. Recently, I've also heard another phrase referring to the same idea called an ostrich maneuver. In the past, the idea of diversification, I think, was called conglomeration. And I think the idea was that if your business has many different types of businesses within it, some of them will be up and some of them will be down, so that overall your company is pretty stable and safe. But another argument was that if you're not focused on your business, it's difficult to manage all of them equally well. So some companies would sell off parts of their businesses that didn't really fit together. There are a couple of other words that people use for kids around this age, especially the younger end. Sometimes they call them tweens. I think it comes from between. They're not quite teenagers, but they're not really like little kids anymore. So depending on the kid and how they act, probably like 10 or 11, 12 years old. Another word people use for them is a preteen or even pre-adolescent.